Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Ironside for one of our Take30 presentations. Today's topic is empowering data governance with a data catalog. My name is Paul Hardy, and that is obviously a pre-COVID-19 picture of me there. A few things you see also mentioned on this slide. I'm sorry, I am the leader of our advisory services practice in data strategy practice. So a couple of things you see mentioned on this slide is that Take30, we are in week 6 of block 1 of Take30, so this is our last session with a data advisor, but we will have coming up a second block that will be published on our website coming up in the next day or two. And we also wanted to add that we're happy to do now what we call Take30 one-on-one. So if there is something of interest in any of the presentations that you've seen from me or my colleagues, we're very happy to spend a little bit of time talking about that on a one-on-one basis. So thank you again for joining us. I hope that everyone is surviving being cooped up at home. So with that, let's get started. So Ironside, this is our purpose, our mission. We help our clients use data to make better decisions about their businesses. So we like the simplicity of that and the clarity of the message. So we hope that resonates with you as well. And this is just a little bit about who we are on a single slide. We've been around for 20+ years, and this is our kind of end-to-end view of the services that we provide. Starting up in the upper right-hand corner, you see Advise. That's the practice that I run, and we focus, as you see there, on data analytics and strategy. We then take our clients through a process that includes, of course, design, build, and deployment of solutions, as well as the governance that covers those solutions. And obviously, we'll talk more about governance today. That's something that obviously our advisory practice is involved in. We also have a managed services practice that will, on an ongoing basis, manage BI platforms for our clients. And I think in the interest of time, I'll move on from that. So the first thing we want to do is take a poll of everyone. So Debbie's going to put a poll up for you. And this is related to data governance. So we want to understand how you would classify the maturity of your current data governance. So Debbie has opened that poll, and I realize these choices aren't perfect, but hopefully you can find yourself placed into one of these areas. We know that for some folks it is non-existent, but we hope that's not the case here, and rather that some of the top 3 choices there will be something that resonates for where you are today. If you're done taking your poll, by the way, or responding to the poll, please feel free to enter questions. At the end of the presentation, we'll take questions, but Debbie will take those throughout the presentation. So if you have some time now, feel free to fill those in.
So thanks, Paul. I am going to close it so we can see the results of this. And I did just want to make one clarification on something you said earlier. We do have one more week in the initial Take30 6-week session. And then we will start on, I think it's June 2nd, the second series.
Okay, I'm sorry about that, my mistake, Debbie.
There, can you see the results, Paul?
I cannot. Perhaps everyone else can, but as the presenter, believe it or not, I don't see those.
Okay, well, hopefully they can. It's 67% are limited and 33% are struggling.
Very interesting that no one had classified themselves as mature. By the way, we don't find that surprising at all in industry. I think data governance is one of those things that everyone aspires to be better at, and therefore wouldn't necessarily classify themselves as mature. But I think that's pretty consistent with what we hear when we talk to our clients. So, sorry about that. My own presentation has dropped out of presentation mode for some reason. Great. Okay. So, in this presentation, we're going to talk about data governance, of course, and ultimately we're going to talk about data catalogs and the role that they play. But I wanted to start with a background on data governance now that you've all described to us the status that you have in your own organization. So clearly, because none of you had non-existent, then you've been struggling with data governance. You have a keen understanding of it in the data environment. So I'm going to tell you some things here that probably won't come as any surprise to you, but it's worth understanding with respect to the background that we find ourselves in for data governance today. So first, data governance is becoming more critical to every organization today for obvious reasons, right? We know that the proliferation of IT skills have also created a proliferation of data. But those IT skills that have enabled folks to create data doesn't mean that those folks had data skills to go along with that. So things from the get-go are not necessarily well structured, or well governed, or had the intention of being governed. But it does mean that there are pools of these undiscovered and ungoverned data sources in every far reach of the organization, right? We work with clients during our strategy assessments to understand what their data assets are. And inevitably, we always find that clients are surprised at the data they didn't know about that is existing in some corner of the organization. Equally, we find that folks that hear about that data wish they had access to it. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And of course, you know, the IoT, social, mobile, the things we've been hearing about in digitization for a decade or more now are creating more external data sources. So there's a huge proliferation of data both internally as IT skills cause people to create data, as well as, of course, coming from external sources as well. And next, leveraging data for competitive advantage is a critical strategic issue today. It's a boardroom issue, right? BI itself, the ability to see dashboards is growing with visualization tools, going beyond reporting and traditional reporting to having real-time dashboarding capability. AI and machine learning, of course, are creating vast quantities of new data because of the process you go through to create AI and machine learning models, exploration, modeling, training, the steps that you see there. That is creating a new source of data repositories. Of course, cloud is enabling the economics and speed of this data creation. And chief data officers, chief analytic officers are becoming commonplace. Right, so leveraging data today is, you can see in all the moves being made in the organization today, that it is becoming imperative that data is better managed and better governed. Another reason is risk, of course. Regulatory compliance is also a boardroom issue because of the risk that's created. And interestingly, in this whole environment, tribal knowledge is actually getting worse and not better. Why do we say that? Because with all this proliferation of data, it's hard to keep track of it. Right, so that tribal knowledge that we all kind of fear as an issue of risk, should those few people that know the right things leave the organization for some reason, it's actually, we find, talking to our clients, that problem is growing and not shrinking. So what does that mean for data strategy today then? Well, it means that you know, data strategy, in order to leverage the value of data assets, needs to push analytics and analytical literacy and data literacy out to the domain experts at the edge of the organization. Okay, that's enabled by a whole set of tools, including low-code tools, right? GUI interfaces for data wrangling, things of that nature allow those data analysts at the edge to make use of those tools. So we're trending in the right direction. And of course, self-service and the tools that enable self-service, it's a popular term and concept. It's largely consumer focused today. When we talk about self-service, it's that someone at the edge can consume data from across the organization. But increasingly, we're seeing the demand for data production to occur out of the edge of the domain as well. So there's a concept that you may have read about recently called data fabric that basically implies that you can create a consumer and producer model for data creation across organizations, meaning that at the edge where those data analysts exist, they would have responsibility to not just consume data, but produce that data in a way that can be governed, even pushing data engineering out to domain experts at the edge of the organization, rather than having them in a typical data engineering organization that might be associated with the chief data officer or with the CIO's organization. So some interesting things happening with technology enabling this change. So what is then the holy grail of data governance? It's to create that citizen data professional or citizen data analyst or scientist, however you wish to refer to that term. But again, pushing data capability out to the edge, enabling the folks that have the domain knowledge. And ultimately, the other holy grail is creating cultural demand for data governance based on trust, right? So one of the big problems with data governance today is that despite what can be up to a year to a decade of work to create that trust across particularly federated organizations, that trust is hard to come by, not based on the dynamics of the people involved, but of the ability to actually manage the data and the metadata underneath it. So, so the Holy Grail is to create that cultural demand for data governance because there is such trust in what data governance is able to accomplish. Okay. So I'm going to go over a few points really quickly about data governance. This slide is meant to focus on a typical structural approach to data governance that we think is very effective. It is what you see here as the three-leveled approach: a strategic level, a policy level, and a tactical level. At that strategic level, it involves leadership, strategic leadership, being champions for the change that occur to create that ultimate cultural change that you're interested in, as well as all of the changes that are suggested at the next level, the policy level. So today, increasingly, what we find is that policy is an extremely important part of the overall data governance structure. As this data proliferates from different producers across a federated organization, the question becomes not just policy associated with typical security and authorization, but really who owns the data and who has the right to say who has access to that data. So there are many policies associated with data governance, but today we find that particular policy is one that is really slowing organizations down, and that's one that can be enacted well within a data catalog, as we'll see. The lower level is a tactical level. That's where the typical data owners, data stewards, data custodians work on a day-to-day basis to make sure that data quality and the other components of data governance are being well managed. What we find is that data catalogs really represent a sea change in terms of a tool that allows that tactical level to be executed, right? So again, the history of data governance is organizations that have done it well have put together the right structures like this and the right committees, but the ability to execute at the tactical level has always been a challenge because of that proliferation of different data sources that are everywhere. So that's just an overview of our practices related to data governance structure: strategic level, policy level, tactical level. Within all those levels are different domains of data governance. You see 4 of them listed here: data governance broadly, but also reporting governance, more for your BI environment and mode 1 types of analyses. Advanced analytics governance, which is something that is becoming increasingly important today, particularly again based on the life cycle of creating machine learning applications and their need to be continually trained and tuned, creates a very large volume of feature sets. And lastly, information governance, not typically associated with data governance, but something every organization needs to be concerned about, particularly as you see things related to kind of document retention and things of that nature. So, but we're going to talk about the other 3: data governance, reporting governance, and advanced analytic governance. Again, we'll touch on these in some little bit of detail here. So the other thing we know about governance, besides it being incredibly important, is it's involved, it's complex, right? What you see here is Ironside's model of data governance within 3 of those domains that I just talked about: data governance, report governance, and advanced analytics governance. And there are 20 different categories listed here, and within those we have 48 subcategories. So when we analyze data governance, it's literally going through that level of detail to understand the maturity of the data governance organization that our clients have. So it's a very robust checklist, and you'll see other models like this. It's not uncommon to be able to find these in the industry publications of one form or another. So that data governance, I won't go into these in detail. I think if you read them, you'll see things that you recognize as being important in data governance. But in general, it requires the structures that we've now talked about. That's kind of 3-layered strategic, policy, and tactical structure. It requires those key policies to be identified by that policy layer. And then it takes people, processes, and technologies. We've all heard that before, but it requires all of those things to execute around the detailed components of data governance that you see listed here, and the 48 that you don't see that are subtending these. So that's great. That's where data catalogs come into this complex and now highly necessary process. Well, data catalogs enable, as it says here, the exposure, collaboration, and the automation of data governance that creates the trust that citizen data professional needs. Okay, so data governance at the end of the day is about trusting those data assets. And what we believe is that data catalog fits into a modern data architecture in a way that enables that trust, as well as other benefits that we'll now talk about. All right, so that was data governance. We're going to talk about data catalog now in a bit, and I want to start that one with a poll as well, just to understand where you all are with respect to your own implementation of data catalog. So Debbie, if you could put that up.
There we go. Everybody should be seeing it.
Great. And again, if you answer that quickly enough, feel free to offer up any additional questions you may have.
Okay, let's just give it a couple more seconds and I think we'll be done, and I will share it.
Great.
Okay, just got one more. Closing it, and I will share it. And I'm hoping that everybody can see it, but the answer is that 29% were nascent and 71% exploring.
Wow. Okay. That is very, very interesting. And I'm going to, oh, good, you've restarted that for me. Thanks, Deb. So that's really an interesting outcome of the poll. You know, data catalog is a technology that's been around for, you know, nearly a decade now in one form or another, you know, emanating originally from data dictionaries, but it is a technology that's been rapidly changing and improving. So I think being in an exploratory stage or an early stage of adoption is, it's actually a good time to be there. And I hope from this discussion you'll take away what we believe is the importance of it in your in data governance. And I'm trying to get, sorry, my own screen to clear up for me here. Okay. Well, so let's talk about the basics of a data catalog. And given some of you are in the exploratory phase, you may well have taken advantage of any number of demonstrations from some of the leading vendors, Elation and Calibra and IBM, and there are many versions of them out there. They all tend to focus on a certain set of functionality that makes them what we believe is the indispensable tool that they are. So I'm going to talk about that just on one slide and try and bring an understanding of what makes data catalogs as powerful as they are. So first, what data catalogs do is they crawl your internal data assets, the same way that Google crawls the web. So ultimately, you end up with the ability to simply launch a natural language search as you would in Google for your own internal data assets. So they do that on all of your assets that you point them to. So all the assets that you set the crawlers to, databases, you know, these can be already BI reports that you have within your business intelligence systems, sandboxes that you might use for machine learning, the wrangling environments, if you use a data wrangling tool that creates sort of intermediate level analyses, of course, all of the assets in your data lakes and your data warehouse. So anything you expose them to, they will crawl and incorporate into the data catalog. And when they crawl it, what they're doing is exposing the metadata and the schema in all of the tables that they are searching. Okay, and they layer those, as it says, with natural language processing algorithms. That helps create the data dictionary that is then searchable by natural language. So they have some sophisticated technologies in NLP that converts you know, archaic or esoteric language within a database nomenclature into searchable content. Okay, and they profile that data and they expose data samples. We'll talk a little bit more about that below. But so now they've exposed all of the metadata within all of your data assets that you have turned them to. But what they also do is they parse the query logs of your databases, and this adds a whole new layer of sophistication. What it does is understand, it says behavioral use of the data. So what that really means is it uses machine language to look at who has used the data through through the query logs. They understand what data is used most frequently, by whom. They run machine learning on that to create, patterns of that usage to be able to expose what is the most popular um, data fields within within your environment, right? So that becomes critically important when it comes to the next step here, creating a collaborative user environment and crowdsourcing institutional knowledge. So now all of your data has been exposed, its usage patterns have been exposed, and from that comes to light what really is used in the organization today. So the task of an analyst somewhere in the organization today might be to look for that tribal knowledge, call that subject matter expert if they know who that person is, ask them what the right data is to use, right? They might be looking for a term related to something as simple as revenue, but boy, there are so many different sources of what some revenue may be identified as in a different business unit, a different stage in time, et cetera. So, and that's true of so many different parameters, different data fields, but they're now able, rather than to call that subject matter expert if they know who it is, this technology has developed on its own that list of users. So you see under this collaborative environment, the top users are identified, and their behaviors with respect to usage of the data and how they've used it is discoverable in depth for each of the assets, okay? Additionally, you can identify the formal data stewards and data custodians that are part of that governance process, that are in that third tier of tactical, the tactical data structure. And the data quality issues that those data stewards and data power users discover are also exposed in a very interesting way in this collaborative environment. There are things called endorsements and deprecations. They have different language and different systems. But the fact is that data is not just exposed on a factual basis. It's almost like having a Yelp capability on the data itself that you have internally, where comments are made and scores are actually created for the quality of this data using the machine learning algorithms. How the data is used, common filters, joins, queries, those are identified and annotated. So oftentimes, if someone is looking into the data and they've done a search because they intend to do a certain type of join or analysis on it, those analyses have also been cataloged. So there is a huge time saving in finding analyses that have actually already been done and that in fact are qualified by the right data stewards or the power data users. Then there's the ability to reach out to those users through the collaborative platform to get questions clarified or to get coaching. In fact, they're open to that. So data lineage, which is one of the core parts of the data governance model that we showed earlier, is exposed to this, often in a graphical format with reference to those deprecations if things are not correct. So we'll trace through data lineage and you can understand where there might be weakness in that data lineage. And of course, sample data itself is exposed, so it's not a matter of looking within the data catalog and understanding what all those data assets are, but not being able to see the data to get a real sense of what it means. So sample data is also exposed. So that collaborative environment, once the technology in both the data and metadata and the query logs have been crawled and exposed, this collaborative environment is really what enables what was traditionally a frustration around the execution of data governance. So, so the last point you see there is, what does this do? It creates that speed of discovery and usage. And this, if you talk to the data catalog vendors, is really a place where they focus. It's that ability, again, not just to now see all of the data across the organization, but to incorporate it into analyses and do that very, very quickly, because you're not spending that original time that was so prevalent today and trying to understand the quality and the source and the lineage of the data that you have. That's all exposed to you immediately. You have quick access to users if you have questions to the power users and stewards. So that speed of discovery is ramped up very, very quickly. And it creates that trust of the data that is essential to that cultural change, right? It is once those data users know that that data is reliable, that they'll begin to actually use it in the way this tool prescribes them to do so, and will create the benefits that that having analysts out at the edge of the organization are intended to do. So we have one more picture to show for that quickly before we go to questions. So this is our conceptual diagram of a modern data platform, and you see the data catalog in purple here on the right. And what I want you to take away from this is that it's just the conceptual picture that it spans all of your analytic assets, right? It's across your data lake and data warehouse. It also is cataloging all of your source data requirements if you point it to the source data. And at the end of the day, as well as, of course, the analytics that are created, as you see across the top, self-service BI, enterprise BI, et cetera. So at the end of the day, it enables some of the capabilities. It is a key building block in creating the capabilities that a modern data strategy needs to be executed, and enables this modern data architecture to create the capability for the data, the citizen data scientist, the citizen data professional out at the edge of the organization. So I know it's a very brief session, so I just wanted to expose you to both data governance and the data catalog and its role. And I realize we've already gone through 25 minutes, but we're certainly happy to talk about it in more depth on those one-on-ones. But in conclusion, so the data governance we know is growing in importance because of the proliferation of data and its competitive imperative. For these modern data strategies that maximize enterprise value, you've got to push those analytics out to the edge, and increasingly not just so those consumers can consume that data, but so they can produce data and publish it back out into the environment at the edge where they know what the quality and value of that data is. But data governance, because of these things, is becoming more complex. There are more data sources, and there's more importance in it because of its role in risk management and compliance. And of course, these empowered citizen data professionals we've talked about, and that cultural demand for data governance, the idea that we want to have well-governed data so that we can trust it, are the key objectives of data governance. And data catalogs, again, they operationalize that tactical layer of the three-layered structure that we talked about in data governance in ways that were not previously possible, we believe. And they create speed of execution and trust for the analytic community. So that is it for our slides. I'm happy to take any questions. Deb, I don't know if you can
Paul,
see
we
those.
do have a couple of questions, and so maybe if we could do these in sort of rapid fire, that would be great. And then we can always reach out independently and individually to give a longer answer. So the first is, how do you encourage people to contribute to the data catalog?
That's a great question, because in our experience and work with different vendors, that's a tough nut to crack, particularly in the beginning when you're rolling out the data catalog itself. And what we would recommend, and I think many of the vendors believe this as well, is that just like any kind of cultural change that you're going to create, you have to find not a proof of concept, but a champion that supports it, and you have to have a proof of success. And so the best way to do that is to start with who are the consumers of the data and who needs that data the most. And if you can, just through conversation, find a sponsor who really sees the value of the catalog and wants to have that example created on their behalf, that's where you should go, even if it's not the most important asset that you think is out there. But create the success before you create the perfect application would be our recommendation.
And what are some of the top challenges you see for an organization in implementing good governance practices?
Well, today, without data catalogs, which is the predominance of data governance that we see being enacted today and that people have been enacting for a long time, the biggest challenge is that trust. And today, the way that trust is created is through very good collaborative structures. Okay, so we talked about a simple three-tiered layer. Within those layers are multiple multifunctional teams. And what I've seen are that there are exceptional individual leaders out there in data governance who can work collaboratively and take the time that is necessary to work collaboratively to bring together those various committees to work on some of the 46 kind of sub categories that we had in data governance. Right? That's why there's a myriad of these types of committees, if you will, and teams, because there is so much for data governance to do. But so terrific leadership is important absent of these tools. They're important with these tools too, with data catalogs, but data catalog takes it to an entirely new level. And Deb, one additional comment I want to make, whether it answers this question or the previous one, is that one of the best practices we've seen for getting it started is to what we call gamify the approach. So put some incentives in place. When the catalog is first rolled out, it will crawl the organization. It will create a great deal of data from exposing the assets and exposing the metadata and parsing the query logs. But that needs to have people join in that collaborative platform that it creates to annotate it more. So the key is, how do you get folks to annotate it? And again, picking the right data asset that has the right enthusiastic consumers is very important. But then creating incentives for them to do it. Simplest things from gift cards to something more elaborate. But that's one of the practices we've seen that works quite well. And then roll that out over time as you have successes. So it's not a big bang approach typically.
That's great, Paul. I think we should just sort of wrap it up for now. There was another question, but I think you have covered it already in just sort of the implementation challenges and determining the best data assets. So I think we're good.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you taking the time and look forward to hopefully having you join us on more Take 30 sessions. Everyone stay well.
Thank you.